Hey everybody, welcome back to the stream. We are live again. This is Sean Colleen, and today we're going to be continuing to work on the Kanma Repo project, which is the tool that we've been building to manage GitHub repositories. And help us archive and sunset them. It is in fairly early days, and so I hope to make some good progress on it today. We'll start with a quick review of where we left off last time, and then we'll get right into it. So today our goal is going to be to get some unit tests in place and to start building out the application and the UI a little bit better. So I think that's going to be our goal for today, and hopefully we'll be able to make that happen. So all right, on with the show. Now, in classic style, when we start the show, I've been trying to give shout outs to an important organization and also to my employer who's making this happen. So we'll pause for 1 second for a quick donation. So the first acknowledgement I want to make is to my employer, Excella. The work that I'm doing currently is on my employer's time, which is fantastic that they're enabling me to do this. And so I want to make sure that I give them a shout out. It's excella.com. We do all sorts of things. We do data and analytics. We do .NET, Ruby, Python, Java, JavaScript. We've got a fantastic group of Agile coaches. We have done cloud migrations. We do legacy systems modernization. We do the whole shebang. So if you are interested in any of that, or you've got some really interesting challenges that you want solved, things with ML and AI, or things, issues that you have with your cloud migration, or you just want to level up as a team, let me know, because it's the kind of thing that we love to do and I absolutely love to talk about. In fact, I will talk your ear off about it all day long if you let me. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about today's organization that I'm supporting. And by the way, for those of you who are in the chat, one, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And two, I actually have a boxed air conditioner on behind me. So if you're hearing a lot of background noise, let me know. I'm broadcasting this from an attic space, kind of sort of a loft space, and it gets a bit warm up here. But it's not so warm that I can't turn this off. So if it's noisy in the background and my Yeti mic isn't filtering it out well enough, let me know, and I'll be sure to just kind of turn that down. Hey Alex, great to see you here. Really happy to have you here as well in the chat. So thank you. Let me know if the background noise is a little much. Okay, great. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the organization that we're sponsoring here today. So the organization I'm going to sponsor today is called In3DC. So it is I want to make sure I got this right. It is the Inclusive Innovation Incubator. Right? So I, like many others, have been greatly disturbed about the issues of systemic racism for a long time now, and very much support the Black Lives Matter movement and a better path towards ending racial injustice here in this country. And so one of the commitments I've made as part of my stream has been to donate to an organization that matters and talk a little bit about them at the beginning of each stream. So it's my own money, it's not my employer's money, though if they want to match it, I will absolutely let you know that. But in this case, if this is my money, that I think it's important to do this as part of each stream. So today's organization that I'm supporting is called the Inclusive Innovation Incubator. And so what they do is they actually provide tools and resources for underserved populations right here in the DC area, which is where I'm operating from. They provide those tools and resources to help these fantastic entrepreneurs get started and get the support that they need and deserve in a business. I only recently found out about this organization, and I love the idea of it, of making sure that people get the appropriate tools and support and institutional help that they need to start this journey, because they're going to become the entrepreneurs that help all of us. And so I'm all about that. They're currently running a campaign called The Time Is Now, which is a donation campaign for 2020. So I'm going to go ahead and donate. Now again, I'm going to be doing a ton of these streams, so I'm not donating a ton of money each time. Depending on how things shake out, I may repeat donate to the same organization, or I may donate more to start upping the amount that I donate. But for now, I'm keeping the amounts themselves fairly small. But I think it's important for every little bit at least to count. So I will do a one-time donation right now of $20. And I'll add my information here. Use my personal Gmail here. Okay, and I see this as sort of the way forward to, support the organizations that matter. And so I'm going to go ahead here, and PayPal's asking me to log in. ahead and do that. PayPal is telling me it'll just take a moment. If I have to enter any of my information, I'll pop up the secret overlay and we'll go from there. All right. All right, my PayPal window is up on the right-hand side here, so just going ahead and updating my address. Of course. All right, so give me 1 second. I'm going to pop open the secret overlay just so I can enter some credit card information real quick, and I will be right back. Okay, and we are back. So the donation is completed and we've donated to yet another organization. So thank you, because your encouragement of this stream encourages me to keep giving and finding these organizations, and I've been absolutely enjoying finding new organizations to donate to at the start of each stream. So great job for you all for tuning in, and great job to these organizations for being fantastic. And with that said, now on to the latest part of our project. So what I've done a few commits, only a few minor commits where we last left off. Just to set the stage a little bit, where we last left off, we were working with the repository. We had gotten Octokit installed. We had gotten their list of repositories for an organization pulled. So that involved setting up the configuration. That involved storing the Octokit key in an Azure Key Vault and doing all of that. The GitHub token in an Azure Key Vault, doing all that good stuff. And so now we are at the spot where it's starting to take on a little bit of momentum, and whenever that happens, I kind of think, okay, I should probably stop myself and add some tests to this project before it gets out of hand. I knew I was creating some classes. I knew that the stuff I was injecting wasn't probably how I wanted it to be, and so we're going to start today. We're going to put some tests around it. We're going to get things set up a little bit more. That shouldn't take too long because we aren't doing too much at this point. And so once that happens, we should be able to go through and update those tests and make that happen. Great. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and jump into the project. Okay, so I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit here on the screen. Okay, and for those of you in the chat, definitely feel free to let me know if you have any questions or if the font isn't big enough, that sort of thing. So where we last left off, I'm going to pull up GitHub Desktop actually. I'll look at a couple of commits that I recently made that I have not yet pushed. So the first commit that I made was I had moved some methods. I had a method that I had created for forwarding the HTTP, or forwarding forwarding the HTTPS flags. I'm sorry, I completely blanked on that. Wow, that's fun. I haven't had a good old memory lapse in some time. It just happened right in front of you live. So actually I had the method to sort of redirect to HTTPS and force that and make sure we're forwarding the headers for HTTP, and so that has been done. And so I moved some methods out of that method. I had accidentally copied too much in there. So I'd done that. I'd fixed a typo in the README file. I had gone ahead and now I extracted a few classes. We had our GitHub repo model class. I extracted that to its own file. I extracted the GitHub settings class to its own file since we were using that. And then I enabled Ncrunch. Now I mentioned Ncrunch a little bit last time, and it's one of my favorite tools for running my tests in an automated fashion. I mentioned that it runs the impacted tests in the background as you code, which is nice, and it's super fast that way. So I'm a big fan of that project, that product, happily a paying customer for that product, and so we'll demo that a little bit today as well. I didn't enable it last time because I hadn't had the license in place, but now I do have the license in place, and so that's great. All right, So those are the changes I've made. I'm going to go ahead and push those up into my branch here where we're introducing the unit tests. I probably could have done them as separate PRs, but I'm going to let myself slide. All right, great. So let's go ahead and open. Let's go ahead and open our code. All right, so we can see here we had created our one test last time where we created a very, just to test our test framework, 1 + 1 should be 2. And we're using the xUnit framework in this case for this class. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that class 1 my doodad test because obviously that is not going to be applicable. But we do now see that xUnit works, that we can actually run a test, that nCrunch is picking up on that test. So you can see these green indicators here. Just to demo what's happening with nCrunch behind the scenes. Let's say I made a change and this test failed, right? What we should see is I'm going to replace this 2 here with a 3, and you'll see how fast nCrunch builds the project, runs the test, and gives that feedback. So go ahead and change that. Now note, I didn't even save a file. I didn't even save the file, right? It is still completely unsaved up there, and we can see that I have this red indicator. I can mouse over, I can see an assertion failure, I can see what's going on, and that's great. Okay, so now that we know that works, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go delete our empty really class1.cs file. Let's go ahead and commit that. Test class, okay. Great. Once we've removed that, I'm going to go ahead and now we're going to try and think about modeling what we want to do with our GitHub client. Now we have a GitHub client. We're also using some of the GitHub settings, and we're passing that in to make calls against the client. And whenever I do that, I'm starting to think, okay, I've got some dependencies here, and I'd like to keep those out of my controller. I'd like for my controller's dependencies to be fairly clean in terms of what it takes in. And I'd like to do that. Now, I hate the idea of calling everything a service, but in this case, I don't want to get hung up on names, so I'm probably going to create some sort of a GitHub service class and go ahead and test that. All right, so let's think about that. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the idea of a GitHub service class, and we're going to go ahead and extract that. So I think I'm going to have a GitHub service, and that's going to have a GitHub client. And I think that seems reasonable, and that GitHub client will still take in the GitHub settings. Okay, I think we can do that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to create a folder here. And I could probably do it architected a little bit differently, and I very well may. I may end up doing more of an action-based or a vertical slice kind of architecture where rather than controllers and models and views and services, it's actually sort of the architecture is based upon the actions that the user is taking. So we may refactor to that at some point. For now, I'm just going to kind of go basics because I've got the muscle memory in place there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a folder here. By the way, for those of you here in the chat, if you want some music, I'm always up for some music. We had some thoughts last time that there really isn't a lot of music that's necessary at this point, so we can give it a shot and see if we want some music. So if you want some music, let me know. We'll turn it on. Okay, so I'll create a folder here called services. Why not? And that means what I'm going to do is we'll try and do this in TDD fashion. We'll see how it goes. So we'll create a services folder down here, and we'll have called GitHub class here. We'll call it GitHub service tests. All right. So now we've got our test file here. All right. So we've got our test class. Hey, Alex says, what kind of music do I have? So let's look. I was thinking about, so Alex, I actually found, I've been using this service called Pretzel. And so I've been really enjoying it for some focused music. And they have sort of a low-key, hip-hop-y sort of thing going on. And so I'll try opening that up and see if we can do the some of that music. We'll see how it goes. I want to check the volume, and we'll see how that goes. So, Alex, I will expect some feedback on you. If music is terrible, let me know. If the volume is terrible, let me know. So we'll start that. Turn the volume down a little bit. I'm going to turn down my own volume here. I think that should allow us to continue. It's a little low now. Okay, let's give that a shot. Turn it up a little bit more. All right. We'll put on a song with a little bit more up-tempo, maybe. Let's see. All right, great. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, and like I said, if you want different music at any time, just go ahead and comment, and we'll get things switched up, especially if you can't hear things. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and we're going to take our GitHub service test class, and we're going to create some tests to start off with. Now, I like to nest my classes for testing, so these are the tests, the GitHub service tests for the constructor. And what I want to do is, I know the GitHub service has to take in a client, a GitHub client. So I'll say GitHub null GitHub client throws exception. Now, some people argue whether or not you should even need to write these kind of things, and for me, it's just additional peace of mind. I don't necessarily need the feedback or the additional belt and suspenders, but it's the muscle memory. I like the muscle memory at this point. So okay, so we've got a GitHub service test. So we'll say var cut. By the way, cut, I'm going to use sub actually, is a short for situation under test. So I always tend to use the variable sut just as a shortcut for myself. We'll say new GitHub service. We don't have a GitHub service class yet, so that makes sense. That's just going to fail. And we should see nCrunch pick up on that in a second with one project is failing to build down here. All right, so we'll say, we're going to pass that in, and we're going to say, go ahead and say GitHub client null. So we'll do a named argument in there and say, in fact, for this, since we're throwing an exception, we'll have to say new action. And this action should be able to say, I think this is fine. All right, so we should be able to do that. And then we should be able to say sut.should throw an argument null exception, and the message, and the parameter name should be GitHub clients. All right, so let's go ahead and see that. I'll put that on one line there. All right, so now this is failing, of course, because our code isn't compiling. We don't have a GitHub service yet. Let's go ahead. Oh, first I'm going to add a reference from my unit test project to my web project there, so my unit test project can actually see my website, or my website project there. All right, I don't have a class yet, so I'm going to go ahead and create that class in my production project. Service. All right, let's go ahead, and we should see the option to import that. We will. Now we can see it's still failing because it doesn't take in anything called GitHub clients. Let's go ahead and say let's take in public GitHub service, GitHub clients. Now there's a GitHub client. Let me see if they have an iGitHub clients. They do. Thank you, Octokit. Interfaces are important for this kind of stuff because we can mock stuff out. We can start to do things with the responses. So I like to program by contract. I always prefer to use a contract where possible. Go ahead and do that. All right, so now we have a test, and at this point we should see. No, it's still okay. Maybe it's action sub equals. There we go. I think I just need to strongly type that there. I like that better anyway. Oops. There we go. So we should see now a test that is failing because I don't actually do anything with it yet. Okay. So we've got that there. Great. Now let's go ahead and update my file here. In fact, I'm going to break out this window. So I've got my tests and my prod code side by side. Let's see if this works here. I'll move this to another vertical document group, and I may not have enough space to quite make that work on the screen real estate. So, okay, that's fine. We'll bring it back. Go ahead and close everything else that we're not dealing with there. All right, so we've got our GitHub service here. Let's go ahead and say private iGitHub client, GitHub client. And we'll say we'll use the same syntax that we used previously, which is to assign that variable, or if that variable is null, throw a new argument null exception and use name of GitHub client. With that, our first test should be passing. And again, I really like this. I like this kind. There we can see nCrunch ran those tests and picked up on it. Fantastic. So we can see here we've got one test there, and we're off and running. All right, so we know we're going to need a GitHub client. That's great. We know that we're going to need to. We know that for now we're going to need to be able to call. We want to be able to get the. We want to be able to get a list of repos in an organization, right? So, all right. And we know now previously, the reason I'm encapsulating the service is also that I only want my client to be able to call get repositories for organization. And I don't want my controller to have to know what organization to use. I don't want to pass those settings into my controller. That's all going to be wired up when we instantiate, because that organization value is hard-coded. We're bringing that in from the config at startup, and this service is going to use that, so our controller shouldn't need to know about it, at least in my opinion. And so we're going to go that route first. All right, so we'll go ahead and get our repositories for the organization. And so what I want to do, created a test, but really what I'm doing is I'm now describing a new method. So I'm going to come in here and create a new test class. Okay, so now I've got a new test class there. And so now I kind of want to think about what I want the GitHub service to do. So let's, sometimes when I get stuck, actually streams are great for this because you have to keep moving forward. Sometimes when I get stuck, you can get hung up on names, and I found, I learned this from the creator of xUnit actually, to go ahead, from Brad, to go ahead and just give everything like a foo or a stupid name at first, and then you can figure out what name you want it to be later. And so first we're going to go ahead and say fact void blah blah. Let's just use blah blah as our test name. And I like this because it just unsticks my brain and lets me explore a little bit about what I want to be doing. So again, we'll do var set equals new GitHub service. All right, and now we need to kind of pass in some sort of GitHub client, right? And so let's go ahead and rather than let's go ahead and get a mocking framework going on there, because we'll want to pass in just a fake of the GitHub client. So let's go ahead and use mockq. And for those of you in the chat, I'd be interested to know what your favorite mocking frameworks are. Alex, I don't know if you have a preference beyond mockq. That is the one that I tend to use just by default, but I know there are a number of them out there. So while we're waiting for that, for those opinions, I'm going to go ahead and install mockq into our test page. By the way, I often call it mock. I've heard it called mockq. Who knows? Let's go ahead here and we'll create the mock manually now, and then we'll refactor and bring the mock in and do all that good stuff. So client equals new mock iGitHub client. Let's go ahead and import mocks library there. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and bring in mock client client.object. So we won't pass in a null. We're not making use of it yet. We're not doing anything yet, right? So I want to say, okay, that result equals set.get repositories for organization. All right, and I'm starting to see kind of what I want to get out of this now. I want to make sure the result passes back the repositories that come from the client. So if the client returns 3 different repositories, we're going to go ahead and make sure that the names of all of those repositories come back. Let's go ahead and do the following. That means that we'll go ahead and we'll say when it gets the repositories for the organization, we want to say a result that should contain, and then we'll have some. Let's actually do this. We'll say repository names should equal new list string. And we'll say repo1, repo2, repo3. All right, so we've got our repository names, our test repository names, and we're going to go ahead and so now I'm kind of seeing what this does. So right now I want to check, what I really want to check is that it returns the repository names from the GitHub client. All right, so what we should see is we'll say mock, and we'll set up this mock. So we're going to say x.repository. Okay. And I think this won't work at first, because what we'll have to do is thank you, Alex. Great to have you by. Thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Hope to catch you soon. Thanks for double checking me on the music as well. All right. So what we're going to say is any call to this get repositories for an organization is going to return a new list of GitHub, new list of repository, and it's going to return. So we'll have repository names here, and we'll have there repository objects, and then what we will do is we'll go ahead and say repository names dot select. So for each item in that repository names, we're going to select a new repository. Right, so that's the GitHub one here. We're going to select double check that I can interesting. Okay, so I can only do name equals let's see if I can do I don't know if I can actually set this. It may be immutable, which is fine actually, if that's the case. Right, okay, so I actually can't set that name directly, which is totally fine because we want that to work in that way. Okay, so that's okay. Let's go ahead and select something else. Let's go ahead. All right. I'm sorry. Wrong window. So do we have our repository names? What I want to do is I want to get a list of those repository objects so that I can actually go ahead and work on those together. So let's go ahead and maybe I'll just need to make up dummy values for the rest of it. That would be very funny actually. So okay. So let's repository names dot select. and oops, sorry, select. So for each, I'm going to do a new repository. Now we see a lot of potentially important fields here. So we're just going to go ahead and say var dummy string. We'll just allocate one string here for this. And then for any string here, we'll do dummy string. Dummy string. We really only care about the name in this case. So that's okay. And long here. I'll refactor all this, by the way. I just let myself, you know, do this here. Okay. Going to go ahead and add, basically adding all default values here. I just let myself do, you know, be a little messy at first. We can always do that. Okay, now we're at the name. Now we're at the name, so we're going to use repo name there. Okay, and then now we've got full name, so we'll just go ahead and do. So we have to specify the full name again. So we'll say dummy string is template. Let's do a bool, so we'll say false. String homepage. You know, I don't even mind this because this stuff is required for each, you know, for each field here, or for each, you know, time you use this object, and so it makes sense that they would have done something immutable with that. So it's going to be false again. Forks count 0. Stargazers count 0. Dummy string for the default branch. Dummy long for the open issues count. Okay. Oh, let's just do 0 there. Okay. Now, push that. Doesn't matter. I'm going to add these dummy values. I'll extract them out afterwards. New repository permissions. False. New repository. Oof. Okay, so I'm obviously going to have to have a dummy repository generator because this is going to be a little bit of inception here. Okay. I'm just going to put something here. I can just provide it. I can provide a number here just for the ID. So let's just do that. ID. So let's do that. Maybe that will work. We'll go ahead and we'll say the repository is a source. So we'll go ahead and do that again. We'll extract all these later again. License metadata. Okay. License metadata. This is good because we'll already have a dummy helper method that we can extract after this. Would help if I spelled it right. Okay. Gonna do some dummy strings here. Okay. Oof, alright, moving on. Has issues. I'm going to go ahead and set false for all of these. Okay. Oof. Okay, looks like we may have finally finished. That's a lot of things to have to dummy up here. So let's go ahead and extract some things here so that we've got an actual helper method going on. I was not expecting it to be quite this fun. Alright. I'm actually going to switch this music track here. It's a little intense for me. Alright. ahead and select, oh, we're going to return a new repository there. All right, so now we're at the spot where we've got a dummy of this. I think we got to extract this pretty quickly. So let's say turn new, well, add a repository builder class here. So we'll say public class repository builder. We'll say okay. Oh, sorry, we'll do repository public private string repository name. So we'll do a repository builder. We'll do a public trans repository builder. We'll call it with name string name. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, I'm going to use the builder pattern a little bit, which is super helpful for test objects and things that are supporting you. Helps if you don't put parentheses after the class. All right, so what we're going to do is we call with name. We'll go ahead, and then we'll return this. And so that's the way you can, use the builder pattern and the Fluent sort of syntax here to return itself and say, we'll say new repository builder dot with name public, and we'll say public repository build. And that's where we're going to go ahead and copy all this stuff. All right, so equals new repository. I'm going to go ahead and copy those values there. We'll go ahead and constant string, constant long. Okay. All right, so we're gonna have to return a repository here. Now, notice we need the repo name here. And we'll go ahead and add that repository name value. And we'll make sure that repository name at the start is an empty string. Go ahead and take our format. We'll take resharper as cues to rename those things. All right, let's extract some of the other items that we have here. We'll go ahead and add a dummy int here as well. Just I just don't like doing all that. Might not even need to do that, honestly. It's just for my own readability. So let's go ahead and look at what we have. Everything is false. We'll go ahead and say so for now, we're just going to create we'll do the dummy internal repository for sure, no matter what, because we don't need anything else at this point. Now we might need to drop that out. We might need to break that out eventually and kind of update our builder pattern for that, but that's fine. We don't have to do that for now. Okay, let's go ahead. It looks like we have some of these forks counting. It's going to replace those with dummy int. A lot of stuff to wire up. Okay, dummy int. I'm gonna go ahead and I'll extract that with resharper, control RV. Oh, that reminds me to turn on Karnak for my keyboard shortcuts there so you can see those. Okay. We'll do control RR. That's gonna give us the variable, and I'll call it dummy date time offset, because why not? Go ahead and extract that out here. Right. So we're going to go ahead when we create when the builder is created, we'll go ahead and set it can't be a constant anymore, right? So it'll be instead it will be a just a private there. Sure, we'll make it read only because we're going to set it at the start there. Okay. Great. All right. I'm going to switch stations here real quick. Just enjoying some of these other songs. Let's see. There we go. That's a little bit more the vibe I'm looking for. We'll see. Feedback on the music is always welcome. If you don't like the music, if you want it off, if you want it, something else gone, feel free to let me know. But I figured something, light in the background might be helpful to help focus. Okay. So for those of you who are just joining us, one, thank you for being here, and two, what we're doing is we're adding some unit tests for our GitHub repository or our GitHub service that's going to use Octokit. And so we're actually right now in the process of building a helper to mock out the results from the GitHub client. And so what we realized is that creating a repo actually involves doing a lot of wiring up because this stuff is immutable from the GitHub client's perspective. All of those things are required, which is totally fine. So we're going to go ahead and create that. But now I'm just kind of extracting we've gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole just to get the builder in place, and then we'll be able to use that in our tests. Okay, so now I'm going to extract some additional stuff here. Okay. All our dummy data is in place. Okay, we've extracted that out. I'm going to extract out the other objects just because I feel like that is something that just looks nicer for me. So, have those. Okay. And we have the repository permissions object that I'm going to extract down as well. So again, Control Resharper, I'm just going to use Control RV. Sure. Okay, that at least feels reasonably clean, given that we have to do a bunch of stuff here. Okay, let's go ahead and extract out the owner object as well. All right. Like I said, for now we're just filling out most of the stuff as dummy data because we don't really need it for the rest of it. So I feel pretty good about that. We have to return it though, so we'll go ahead and say return repo. All right, now that should allow us to use our builder in our tests. So let's go on and head back up here, and what we want to say is repo. So we have got our list of dummy repo names. What we want to do is create a bunch of repositories. We're going to create these 3 repositories and mock out our GitHub client to actually return repos with those names. And we're going to make sure that our GitHub service actually returns the correct results from the GitHub client. Go ahead and do that. All right. And the reason I'm doing a test like this is because I want to make sure we don't all of a sudden start using like the full name attribute or something like that coming from GitHub. And also just because it feels good to get into the muscle memory of doing some automated tests again. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Here we go. So, repo equals new repository builder. I'll say with name. And we're, passing that repo name, build. All right, So that should give us a list of repository objects at that point, because what we're doing is we're taking the names, click that, we're taking the names, and then we're selecting a new repo object, and we're using our builder to give us that object. So that makes it nice and clean. I'm not copying and pasting a bunch of those gazillion fields in my tests, so I feel pretty good about that. All right, so what I want to say here is that when I go to the repository and I get all for org, that should return the repository objects. And let's see what's going on. Cannot convert to a task. Ah, okay. Let's go ahead. Oh, there are task is a task of repository. Wait, sorry. Result method returns. Oh, let's see. Get all for list returns a task of I read only list. Returns task dot from results. New list repository and repository objects. Alright, now what am I doing wrong here? And by the way, this is definitely an interactive stream. As I go through this, feel free to feel free to let me know if you're seeing where I'm going wrong, or if you want to jump in, or you don't like the design choices I'm making. I mean, this is definitely an open discussion, and I welcome everyone jumping in on this. By the way, as I mentioned before, that includes discussion on the music. I may shut it down for a little bit. We'll have to see. Okay. I read only lists, so where it is. 1 second. Okay. Sure, I understand. Can I go to implementations when found? I see. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's see. As I think I can do that. I should be able to do task that from results, repository objects. All right, we'll see if that's going to work there. So now what we understand here is that we've got some repository names that we want. We're going to go ahead and get the repositories by those names. We're going to create some dummy repository, we'll create some mock repositories there. Our mock clients, whenever we call get all for org, is going to return that task. All right, so what we should see now is that the result, when we call get repositories for organization, which again still doesn't exist yet, what we want to say is that result dot select, since it's going to be result, we're going to go ahead and select the repo result name, and to list should contain, let's do this. Let's get the result. So with the item names, let's actually say result names. Right. We'll say it should contain all three of those repos. So result names dot should contain repository names. I think I can do that. We'll see once I create the method if that's the actual FluentAssertions syntax. I forget a little bit of that. All right, let's go ahead. Go ahead and create that method in our production class. So I want to return a list of repository. Sorry, list of GitHub repo, which is our own type that we created for this. So we'll say so one thing I know that I want to get to here is let's just get to a failing test here. Look at the encrunch test. I should be able to see at least the build is passing, right, but this is failing right now, right? So we're getting to a not implemented exception. That's great. And so one of the things I know I'm going to have to do here is call GitHub client dot repository dot get all for org, and then pass in. For now, I'm just going to do some. For now, I'm just going to do a blank, an empty string, because our mock should be. Okay, there now we do. Let's see. Let's try this. Turn. Okay. Let's see. Task. So we want to list a GitHub repository. This is returning a task of. Oh, we want to do awaits. This is going to be async task of list of GitHub repo, actually. In fact, while we're at it, let's give that the async suffix, since that is fair. Okay, and we want to say return repos dot select GitHub repo. That's our object there, and we want. All right, I think that should do it. So. We want to await that still. All right. Okay. All right. Now this is probably still going to fail because I think, if I recall correctly. So we should. Oh, we have to await this. We will go ahead and await that, which means we need to make this test method into an async task rather than a void. All right, see it do it. Okay, so now this works, which is fantastic, right? So what we see here is our test is now passing. We can see that it's going to, if you pass those in those repository names, we'll go ahead and convert those to repository objects. And I'm actually going to extract this into a method. Call it get dummy repository objects for names. And we should be passing on repository names. Okay. Great. And so it should have extracted that to here. Okay, great. And notice that we've got some, we've got this helper here, this repository builder. So we've got our first test passing, all right? So I'm gonna go ahead and commit at this point because I feel pretty good about that. So first service test. All right, so we've got our first GitHub service test. Now what we're gonna do is go from there and do some cleanup. So we have this repository builder that we had extracted, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and add a folder in my test project called helpers. Extract that. Oh, sorry, I accidentally renamed it. Instead, I'll go ahead and interesting. Let's go go ahead and do that. Go ahead and class here in our helpers folder called repository builder. So those of you who are in the chat, I'm interested. You know, where are you from? Where are you joining us from in this this great big world? I haven't actually met a ton of people in the chat yet, and so I'm really excited to hear more about where you're from. All right. All right. We've now refactored to extract our repository builder. Our tests are passing again. Great. Okay. So that is starting to look a lot better. Now we can also clean up our tests because now we've got, you know, the idea of this mock GitHub client that has to get passed in each time. It's got to do some other stuff, right? So I kind of want to get it to a spot where we've got at least a new GitHub service with our mock that's coming in by default. So let's go ahead and do that. Now the way we do that here in the GitHub service tests is, right, I'm going to have a field here. We'll call that such, and we'll call it a GitHub service here. And now I want to sort of set that, right? And so this is going to be the equivalent of in NUnit of a setup method. xUnit does that in the constructor. So go ahead and say public GitHub service tests. So in the constructor, what I want to do is kind of abstract some of this mock stuff here. So I want to say such equals new GitHub service, and actually I want to kind of set up this mock here, so let's do a private mock of iGitHubClient. We'll call it mock client. I want to go ahead and say that the mock client new mock GitHub client. So we'll instantiate our mock. We'll instantiate our mock, we'll instantiate our service class, and then we can just mess with the mocks themselves. So here, instead of this, what we'll do is, so we've got all of that. We're going to instead remove that. We're going to suggest that that mock client is something we can set up. Go ahead and do that. Static context. Oh, oops, sorry. Wrong spot. So I was doing this here. I actually want to do this in the class that I'm dealing with here. So here we go. I'll add this constructor there. I'll rename that. So now we've got access to this mock client here, which is great. And we've got our set here, but we actually don't need to recreate this, right? So I'm going to remove that from our tests. All right, so now we're really getting to a spot where I feel like we've got names here. It's pretty clear what's happening. Okay, I'm for it. Let's look here. Okay, so I've got one extra. All right, so let's do one more thing. So we'll say setup for tests. Got that now. All right. Now I actually realized I was looking at this and I'm thinking like, okay, I could probably combine this because I was gonna dump this into one line and create the repository objects, but I think it's fine to actually keep them separate now for readability. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this music down just a little bit because it is in my ear. All right. For everybody on the stream, I hope the music is okay for you. Again, feel free to jump in and let me know if you've got any questions or concerns about the music and the volume and all that stuff. I want to make sure first and foremost that you can hear me. Okay. All right, so we've got our tests here. They're still good to go. Let's see, 2 tests. What are the 2 tests here? Okay, we've got the constructor, right? Okay, great. Now I'm realizing, okay, so actually to figure out, we have to use the, we need to make sure that we're using the organization that comes in from the settings. So next, we've got the settings that say what our repo name is, and so we need to be able to make sure that our GitHub service is utilizing that setting. So we'll check that in a minute. So let's go ahead and do this. So effect here. Okay, so there we go, repo name from settings. We may have to actually create another test before this is over. In fact, let's do that first. We're going to need to utilize the GitHub settings that we brought in, that we are utilizing now. Now, for those who are just joining us, we have it in our controller. We are pulling in the iOptions GitHub settings, and we're using that in the org there. So we're going to want that to be set up. Actually, 1 second here. There's a spider on my wall, and that's always a fun interruption to a live stream. So I'm going to safely remove that spider and maybe, let him go. We'll see. Nah, I don't think it's going to be an option this time. Okay, 1 moment. You know what? Spider got away. So you know what? He wins this one. We're going to let him go. He's not big. I'm feeling charitable today. It's fine. Okay. For those of you on the stream, are you afraid of spiders, not afraid of spiders? I'm always interested to hear that kind of stuff too. Am I alone in my not wanting spiders to survive? Are you someone who puts them outside every single time? I don't know. All right. So in the home controller, we have these iOptions settings, and that's so we want to make sure that whenever we pass in those settings, it's going to go ahead and work correctly. So this repo, this GitHub service is going to get an iOptions settings into it. So let's go ahead and write the next test then. That means for our constructor, we're going to come up here and write another test. Say public void null options throws exception. And so here we'll go ahead and copy our code here. And by the way, this is all just playing catch up. I mean, we're going to go ahead and add some more functionality pretty soon, but I feel better with a solid foundation. So, okay, new GitHub service, GitHub client's null. In this case, we'll say for the purposes of this test, we'll say dummy client. We'll have a mock that won't do anything, and then we'll have a mock of iOptions of GitHub settings. So now we've got our dummy client and our dummy settings there. This is for the purpose of this, this constructor test. So I'm actually gonna pop those in here because when we're coming up with, we're testing the nulls on one setting, we want to provide dummies for all the other settings. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got GitHub client is null, and to make this test pass still, we're going to need to actually add here dummy settings.object, right? So that makes sense. And then here we're going to want to add the dummy client, or dummy clients, and here we want to say null. And it should be GitHub settings is the field that we want. All right, now GitHub service, we're going to need to go ahead and create. So we have iGitHub client here. We'll need iOptions GitHub settings. We have them here. Private GitHub settings here. And we'll say GitHub settings equals GitHub settings dot value. Now notice it's I options here, so you can call to the GitHub settings dot value, which is what you get from that I options. That's what gives you the actual settings there. Say value. And if that has no value, then we'll similarly throw new argument null exception, name of GitHub settings. I'll probably have to fix this one more spot in my tests here. You can see that www.client.object. And when I create that mock here, right, I'm going to need another mock here. So we'll go ahead and create mock, new mock options here. We'll call mock settings. Private read only. We'll call it mock settings. And we'll go ahead and pass that in. Okay. Now at this point, we still have our build failing, so let's see where I'm missing that. I know I'm missing something somewhere. I'm missing a parentheses. Well, that's just silly. Okay. Now we can see in another one of our tests, we can see that this mock is null, right? Something's going on there. So we have to set up this mock to return new GitHub settings. So let's go ahead and say that a private read-only settings will say we'll call it dummy settings for now, or we'll call it settings object equals new GitHub settings. What we'll say for now is by default this mock for our settings will return, when it looks for the value, it's going to return that settings object. So in that way we should be able to set the settings here, and it'll be reflected in that mock. So now once we do that, we can see all our tests are passing. Let's go ahead and commit that. So it's an additional test. So we'll say test for injected settings. There we go. All right, now we've done a bit here, so we're going to go ahead and push that up. Hey everybody, welcome to the chat. Thanks for joining us here. Just to pick up where we left off, we're kind of knee-deep in writing some automated tests for the beginnings of a web app that we're creating to pull GitHub repositories and manage them, and actually help automate some of the archival process. And so, we're at the very basics right now. We're just getting the test framework set up to pull a list of repositories. Right now, it literally pulls a list of repository names, but we're just going to get our own service going, get some tests around it, get it good, and we'll get some positive muscle memory along the way. So for those of you who are in the stream chat, I would love to know, where are you from? What is what is your background? What are you interested in? Is any of this stuff new to you? Are you experienced? Tell me a little bit about yourself. This is definitely a two-way street, and I'm getting used to having nice conversations while coding, and it's kind of fun. So definitely tell me a little bit more about yourself. Alright, so now that we've got our constructor, and in the meantime I'll just keep blathering on like I do. So I've got a constructor set up now. ReSharper's telling me I can refactor some things, but I'm good for now. Okay. Here we see field can be made read-only. Okay, we'll make those fields read-only. Let's do some ReSharper cleanup. Okay, sure. Resharper field name suggestions. I'm okay with those. Let's do that. All right, what else do you want, Resharper? Okay, we'll get rid of that unused using. What else? What else do we got? Possible unassigned object created by the new expression. So that's something where I want to actually disable this in our file because we're going to be newing up this stuff. Actually, you know what? I'm going to see if I can do it in this class. Disable for class CTOR. So what that's going to do is going to disable that resharper warning there. And that's good because I just, I will be newing up some objects in that way, specifically to check and throw exceptions and things like that. So I don't want it to throw on me there. Convert to local variable. I'm going to ignore that one for now. That's okay. Maybe we'll do that in a little bit. All right, so we'll commit those resharp cleanups. I do that, usually just use a shortcut. I do like resharper. I know some people don't like the performance penalty. My colleague Alex is not the biggest fan of it, but I really like the tool because it helps me do those kind of minor cleanups out as I go, and I find that the cumulative effect of that is pretty strong. So even though Visual Studio's got some built-in stuff, I just, I like the muscle memory of resharper. I don't think it bogs me down too much, so I enjoy doing it. All right. Great. So now we've got all of that there. So we're taking in our options. We're making sure they're not null. And so our next test is going to be to make sure that our service is actually calling the GitHub client with the correct organization name, and that's going to be the organization name that comes from our settings. Let's go ahead and do that. So returns the repository names from the GitHub clients, and we're going to want to make sure that method, we'll write it underneath this test actually. All right. Now there are a couple different styles of writing these unit tests, by the way. I find that if you're using this sort of syntax, I tend to like, if I'm using like a classic NUnit syntax, I like to use the method, the method name underscore the input that we're getting underscore what the expectation is. In xUnit, I find that I tend to try to use the class structures instead. So now if we were to follow this along, we can see, okay, the GitHub service tests, the constructor has got these certain tests, the get repositories for organization method has these certain tests. And so if you were to read that, it reads like, GitHub service test constructor with a null GitHub client throws an exception. And so I still have the hierarchy. I can still read those tests. And so I find that that's good enough for me. All right. And for those of you in the chat, I'd be interested to know what your experience is with unit testing as well. Like, is this old hat for you, or are you like kind of wishing we'd move on right now and do this later, or is this interesting to see how someone's working through these tests? I'd be curious to know that. Okay. For now, let's go ahead and write this test. Okay, so what we first want to do is, let's say settings objects. Let's go ahead and set that, right, for the purposes of our test. Since we're creating a new one each time, we'll say my test org. What we want to do is we'll say var results equals situation under test, get repositories async, and then what I want to know is the mock client, and I want to verify that repository dot get all for org was called, and I want to verify that it was called with, let's double check this, so we'll say var test org name, so we'll extract that. I want to verify that it was called with that test org name, and it was called with times once. So we should fail. All right. And so I'm actually going to remove that result since we're doing a call to it. All right. So this is failing, right? It's expected the invocation once, but it was 0 times. That makes sense because we actually didn't call the GitHub client at all here. So let's go ahead and call that. And we'll say get get repositories for organization async. We'll say their org name equals GitHub settings dot organization name. Right, now I could have, by the way, I could have done the org name here and I could have referenced it throughout. I just feel like whenever I have a dependency like that in a method or something like that, I like to do it up front and just be kind of, you know, unless there's like a performance penalty or something like that, I find that it's interesting to be able to just go ahead and use the org name that way. So let's see. So we are going ahead and calling that, but we see we have some tests that are still failing. So let's see what's going on with that. Let's see. See how many times it's calling. Okay, let's see. Okay, I think that we're actually going to have to add the mock here for the iRepositories client here. And that's, I think, fine. We want to make sure that when it calls iRepository that we're returning our mock repositories client, so then we can do that. Let's go ahead and refactor our tests. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's say we'll have our mock here. Mock iRepositories client. Call this mock repo clients, and we'll do some different setup here. So what we're going to do is say mock client.setup x dot repositories. Anytime it calls repository, we're going to return mock repo client dot object. Okay. So now we're always going to do that, and then in our setup elsewhere, we're going to go ahead and scroll down here. I think what we want to do, okay. So we have the setup here. Right, we're actually going to want to do setup of mock repo clients and get all for org. I think in this case what we should see, okay. All right, let's find out why nCrunch is saying these are failing. Not set to an instance of an object. Okay, so it's a null ref here. Client to object. Oh, I probably should instantiate that. That would be helpful. Yeah, that would make sense. Okay, that's a lot better. Okay, so we've instantiated that. Now what we've got is we have our tests are doing a little bit better here. So now we can see that it is indeed calling that using the test name. Okay, so we'll say, okay. Let's do more tests. I'll be lazy about that. Okay, so now let's see what we've actually got left to test. I think at this point I may want to move on to the home controller, because let's look at how the home controller is currently using things. So we've got iOptions, GitHub settings. We have a logger that we're passing in. We're just calling this. Okay, so I think we have a couple things we can do. One, I think first what I want to do is I want to go ahead and wire up this GitHub service in our web app and go ahead and actually use that in our controller and refactor to use that. Once I do that, we'll probably add a couple of tests for the controller as well, and then we should be good to go. But at least we'll have some human confirmation of this right now as well. If any of you have questions about unit testing or my approach to unit testing or what we're doing currently, let me know. Definitely also interested in your experiences with unit testing, what you've done before, what has worked, hasn't worked, any questions you have. I have no problem going down a little bit of a path here with anybody on the stream. So definitely let me know what your experience has been so far. And instead of pulling in these settings and things like that, we're going to go ahead and pull in our GitHub service. And that means that rather than this, we're going to go ahead and say, I'm going to refactor my controller to use okay. So we're still setting up our logger here. We'll still expect the GitHub service to be passed in. And rather here we'll say GitHub service done. Okay. Okay, so now we've got our service that we're using. We've got that there. All our tests still pass. Okay, and this isn't going to work right now because I'm not actually wiring this up in my startup here. So I'm going to go to my startup. Let's go. I'll commit afterwards. I'll go to my startup here. All right, we've got here, we're configuring the GitHub client, right? And we'll still do that here. And we'll do services.add transient GitHub service. And we'll say either. So, and we'll still need this, we'll need the GitHub client here. So we'll say, service equals new GitHub service. We've got, and we need a GitHub client, so here we will say provider.getService GitHub client. And we'll need some options here. We'll say provider dot, oops, sorry, scroll there, copy that from up here. Okay, we'll return that service, so that should be wired up now. Don't forget my semicolon. Let's extract that stuff. We'll say GitHub clients. I'll go ahead and extract that as well. All right, so now when we ask for a GitHub service, we'll go ahead and get that. All right, sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and all our tests are still passing. So let's go ahead and start this up. And if that works as we're looking for, we should have all of our service wired up and doing its thing. Okay. Now, reminder that the configuration elements I have here, we did in the last stream. These are in my secrets.json file. So I've got a GitHub personal access token that I'm wiring up. I've got some settings there. So here in my app settings, for example, I have a bunch of these that are change me. I've got some things for Azure AD that we've set up. I've got this access token here. So for right now, the access token I've got in my secrets.json. The organization name I have here that is being overridden at runtime. So this should be our Excel organization. All right, let's go ahead and hit F5 and then see what happens. With any luck, it'll inject the GitHub service. We should see the same list of repositories that we've seen previously. And since we had the other pieces wired up previously, I'm thinking this should work correctly, but that's the fun of things. We'll see how it works out. All right, let the browser load up here. Okay, gonna go ahead and it's okay that we have this problem, right? Because I'm using a self-signed cert, that's okay. I recently switched my default browser to Firefox, which has been fun. So if anybody's got opinions or thoughts on that, I'm always interested in that too. All right, that's gonna go ahead and do its thing. Hey, there we go. So it looks like, okay, our list is wired up. I'm seeing all of these repositories. That is awesome. Great. So far so good. So let's go ahead and you say inject our new GitHub service. We'll commit that. All right. right. By the way, as part of this repo, let's do that now. For those of you who are joining us, we've previously gone through and added some tests. Right now, our build process in Azure pipelines is being done, entirely containerized, but we're not actually running any tests. And so I would like to go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and look at my Azure Pipelines YAML file here. So let's go ahead and just pop this open. I'm just going to use VS Code real quick. So my pipelines file is outside of my solution directory here. So let's go pop that open. All right. I see here what we're going to do is build. So we're going to build that image, and so that's in our Dockerfile right there. So let's go ahead and then look at our Dockerfile and update that to run the tests. So looks like we've got repo.web. So we're only copying that one project. So we're gonna have to think about that and how we're doing that as well. For now, I'm gonna copy. I'm gonna go ahead and repo. I think we have it's called repo.tests.web.test.unit. So tests.unit. Add in that. So we'll copy those project files and we'll store them both. Assuming this works, I'll add some wildcards, right? Because that's not really how we want to have this. We're not trying to hard code every single one of these project files. Okay, so we want to restore that. We want to build it. In fact, though, I kind of feel like we should be introducing a solution at this point. So never mind. Let's save this. Let's get these tests running locally, and then we'll do another PR to introduce a solution and actually get that stuff running well. So now that we've got the stuff injected, the last thing we wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that we're providing the results from the server or from the service here to our controller. I also want to do some quick tests to cover the fact that we're injecting the service, etc., etc. Make sure we're throwing if that service is null. So I think we're okay there. All right, let's go ahead and do that. So we got our services tests here. Now remember, I've got my controllers folder here, and that's where I want to set that up here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a controllers folder in my test project. Okay. I'm going to add a class here called home controller tests. Now remember, I'm using xUnit here, so I'm going to go ahead and use the class format here. And so I'm going to be testing the constructor in this case, so I'm going to go ahead and add a CTOR class there just to kind of organize my tests a little bit. For those of you who are joining, thank you. Great to have you with us. We're working through the last of some of these unit tests real quick for some of the basic setups of our GitHub repo management tool, which as of this point only pulls a list of repositories. So we're adding some initial unit tests to get us started. Then we're going to update our Dockerfile and get that all building and deploying and working as we expect it to, and then we should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead real quick and facts. So what I want to know is with a null logger, we'll throw an exception. And I'm also going to go ahead and just because I'm going to skip ahead, I want to kind of make an outline for myself. So I know usually TDD, you try to go one test at a time. I don't mind making an outline here because I think we're going to want to have, we take in a logger, we also take in the GitHub service. So we'll say null GitHub service. What happens in this case, throws exception, we'll spell it correctly. All right, there we go. So I've got that, and I'll just do assert dot fail. We'll throw new not implemented exception here. So that test will just always fail. That's okay. We should be able to watch that happen in NUnit. Okay. Or in crunch there, so that's always failing right now, that's fine. So here we're going to do the same thing as earlier. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit rather than extracting, right? So we're going to have our private home controller, and that's going to be our situation under tests. We're going to have a private mock of an iLogger, which I think is the Microsoft extensions logging. Let me double check and see which iLogger of. Okay. iLogger of home controller. Okay. Controller. Microsoft extensions logging. Okay. And we'll say mock logger. All right. And then we'll go ahead and say. Oh, interesting. So, so one thing that I didn't do, right, I want to make my own code testable, of course. And here I am, I have services here. I've got GitHub service, right, but I don't have an interface there, right? So I should probably extract an interface from that. Go ahead and do that. Extract interface, thank you. We'll go ahead and provide that. All right. So now I've got an iGitHub service here that I can use. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get that mock in place. If you've got any questions about my testing style or how I want to approach these things, I'm all about it. Feel free to drop them in the chat. And definitely don't forget to hit follow. If you're enjoying this session, if you're liking the idea of working through this stuff, or you want to discuss more topics, I'm going to be doing a ton of stuff coming up on Azure, on unit testing, on automated testing in general, all sorts of cloud stuff. I'm doing some Terraform stuff coming up probably, some stuff with Azure functions. So definitely hit the follow button if you're interested in any of that. And I'm always up for doing a session on something that you want to see as well. So there's a suggestion box on my Twitch channel. Feel free to drop a suggestion in there, or find me on Twitter and let me know what you want to see. So for now, we'll do our mock GitHub service here. Okay, so now we're gonna in the constructor for our test of the constructor, we're going to wire that up. We'll say mock logger equals new mock, same thing here with the mock GitHub service. Right. So first we want, so we're right now going to wire that stuff up. We actually don't need that sut yet. And sut being short for situation under test, for those of you who are unfamiliar with that. So for the null logger, so we're going to go ahead and say action act equals new home controller. We'll pass in, we're saying null logger, so we'll say null, and here we'll pass in the mock GitHub service, right? So we're passing that along. Now, home controller doesn't currently take in the iGitHub service, it takes in a GitHub service, so we'll have to modify that as part of this. Let's go ahead and add that I. We'll have to make sure our internal variable there is also the interface. Great. Thank you, interfaces and contracts. So we'll say act.should throw argument null exception, and param name should be logger. Now, I think since we have this code in place, this test might actually pass right off the bat here. And it does, and that's because in our home controller we're already previously saying, hey, assign the logger, or if the logger is null, throw that null reference exception. So that's great. So the test that we do for GitHub service won't pass. The test we do for that GitHub service will not pass because we're not actually throwing the exception here. So let's go ahead and get that written up. And after that, I think we're good. I'm not going to go ahead and test the controller method to death, unless you want to see that, in which case, if you want to see me test the controller method as well, feel free to let me know, and I'll test the action method, and we can go through that. I've done that before, but we can go through it together or skip it. I'm going to err on the side of skipping it and getting our Docker build going and running these tests each time, so we've got that whole cycle complete. Oops. Go ahead and copy those things. Now this time we're going to use our mock logger here, and we'll make this null GitHub service null. So we're going to go ahead and say it should throw the exception. Now this is going to run. It fails because no exception was thrown, which makes sense. We just saw that it wouldn't happen. Let's go ahead and All right. With that, we should see nCrunch go ahead and run that code, and we should see that turn green. That's why I love nCrunch, right? Because I'm just saving the code, and I'm getting all this great feedback right on the stream today, which is nice, because I don't have to go and say, okay, now we're going to wait for 10 seconds while we build the project and run it and run all of our tests. I think it's really important to run all of your tests one at a time. And make sure they're all running every single time so you get that safety harness. At the same time, doing that on the stream or when you're trying to just get into the flow, it can be very difficult. And so I really appreciate nCrunch's feedback and how it does this so quickly there. All right, so with that, I feel like we've got some of that covered here. Let's go through and just do our quick resharper cleanup. Say, home controller tests. I'm going to go ahead and discard the changes to our Dockerfile. We don't want any changes there. All right, so home controller test, we've got that there. We've got the interface added, okay. And now let's just do some quick resharper cleanup just because I like to keep it tidy. Okay, so unused using statements, that makes sense, sure. We have that possibly, right, so we can disable that one warning because we're definitely creating a new object and not using it because that's part of the points. So we're going to disable that at the class level. It's got some naming suggestions so we can make these read-only. Sure, let's do that. Like I said, I do not mind the assist. These are the sort of things that I think are important, but I almost never remember myself. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Are we using that anymore? Okay. So let's see, what are those things? Okay, potential typo. No, it's good. Okay, so I think I feel good about that. We've done our cleanups here. We'll just look at my other files real quick. Why not? Okay, some cleanup there. Name change. These are all safe refactoring, so I'm just kind of breezing through and doing them. That's great. All right, let's do some more sharper cleanup. If you've got any questions about ReSharper, by the way, I use that pretty extensively. I'm a big fan of that tool, so feel free to drop questions about that in the chat as well. All right, let's push those up. And with that, I feel like we've actually we've got our service extracted, we've got it under test, we've got those things in place. So let's go ahead and get that merged. I'm going to hit Control-R, which from GitHub Desktop opens my pull request here. So we've introduced our unit test. I think we've done that pretty well. Go ahead and edit that to remove the WIP portion of that because we have WIP bot or with bot that is going to prevent us from merging if that is enabled. So we've got one successful test here. Now, curiously to me, I am not seeing the Azure DevOps build run here. So let's go ahead and see what's going on there. It may just be that I'm a little impatient and it has kicked off yet. So let's go ahead and check that out. Go to our pipeline here. Okay, so it is definitely running. There we go. So I was just a little impatient. That's fine. It is the cloud, and that's great, but you got to give it a couple of seconds to start sometimes, I suppose. Okay. Go ahead and watch that do its thing. Now again, remember, as I said, this is just building the image at this point. It's not actually running our tests. So the next thing we're going to do, I think, is introduce a solution, something at the solution level, copy everything over for our CS projs, run the restore and the test based on the solution file and not the CS proj files. And that should be a little bit better for what we're trying to do here. All right, looks like the build is doing its thing. All right. And so the way we're going to do that is we'll try and do it through the .NET New. We'll do a .NET New solution, and then we'll add the existing projects to that solution. And then we'll modify our container to pick up on the solution stuff instead. Okay, finishing the build. Okay, so we're good to go. Now we can merge that. We've got all that stuff. Fantastic. Okay. So that is merged. We're good to go there. Let's go ahead and pull that, and then we'll start again. All right, so pull that. Great. We got that latest commit. Okay. So now what we want to do is we'll add an issue here. That's okay. We don't need to add the issue. We know what we're doing next, so we'll go ahead and sure. We'll go ahead and create a branch for that, and we'll say add solution and tests to build. All right. So first up, it sounds like we're going to need a solution file, right? So I'm going to go ahead and, I guess we're allowing that. I'm just going to go ahead and close out of this. That's fine. We'll open it in a second. Let's see what I've actually got here in my directory and see what we're working with here. All right, so in my source directory, so I don't have any solution right now, and so I think what I'll probably do is create a solution right here in this source folder right here. We'll call it comma repo, and we'll go from there. We'll add those projects. So let's try and do that from the command line because it's been a second and I haven't done that for a bit. And for those of you out there on the chat, I'm curious to know whether you've worked with the .NET New command line at all, or whether you've done anything along those lines. So feel free to let me know if you've had experience with that in the past. I'm curious as to know whether you've actually used it. So I'm going to go ahead, and I like to work within Visual Studio Code, so I've got stuff right here, and it's just a habit. I like to use either VS or VS Code. Alright, so we'll open the source directory there, and next up what I want to do is I'll say .NET new SLN. I'll see if I can do a help for that. I don't remember the commands off the top of my head, which is part of why I do this, to kind of refresh my muscle memory there. So let's see what the actual output is there of .NET new. Couldn't find an installed template, so maybe I can do sln -- help. Okay, so it's giving me the help for the command. All right, that's fine. Let's just try to do this. .NET new SLN, what does that do? So it'll probably create a solution called SRC, that's my guess. It did. All right, so let's see. As much as I don't care about that, I could just rename it if I wanted to, but let's see if we can get the usage of this command right. .NET new SLN is a -- name. There we go. Okay, so I've created the solution file using that -- name, and then I think we can do .NET. So that's here in the directory where I currently am. So I can do .NET. I think I can do .NET sln add conmarepo.web. Let's see. The solution file to operate on, current directory for one, the project path. So maybe I have to do relative path now. File add. Interesting. That seems to be correct to me. Maybe I need to do a directory in the end. Feel free to chime in, those of you in the chat, what I'm getting wrong here. And I may end up just doing it manually, but I'd like to do it correctly. Could not find any project in conmarepo.web. I think we have a project in there, so we definitely have a project in there. Okay, that's interesting. So CS proj. So I add it directly. Could not find. Interesting. So from here, from our SRC folder, we're saying conmarepo.web, conmarepo.web.csproj. Well, that is interesting to me. Place projects. Okay, maybe I have to do .NET sln still on file, add. Oh, I see what's going on here. I've had my whole directory structure screwed up this whole time. Okay, that makes sense. All right, give me 1 second here. And you know what, actually, give me, folks, I'm going to take a break for a second. Give me 1 minute and I will be right back. I'm just going to grab a drink of water real quick, probably 30 seconds. Give me 1 moment. I'm going to go back to standby, so the music's going to cut off. I will be right back. Hey folks, we are back. I'm actually going to go ahead though for 1 second. While I'm away, I actually have to do something for 1 moment. While I'm away for the next 2 minutes, probably, I'm going to go ahead and actually put up a. Let's go ahead and pull up a notepad window here, and we'll say back in 2 minutes. You can use my super hacky notepad here. Once I do that, actually, I'm going to go ahead and cut out real quick. When I do that, folks who are familiar with the .NET New command, feel free to jump in and let me know if there was a spot that I was going wrong. Otherwise, I will be right back in just a moment. Okay, 1 second. All right, and we are back. Thank you for your patience there. Let's go ahead and get in. Well, you know what, let's just keep this thing moving. I'm not trying to figure out this .NET New command. Let's go ahead and get those projects added. So I think I see what's going on here. So note that I actually have what happens, I wanted a root level solution. I actually wound up with a website, then with a website folder here. So I gotta adjust my folder structure and a bunch of stuff. So let's go ahead and do that. So I wanted my solution here and my projects here. What I got was this instead. So let's go ahead. I'm actually gonna go ahead and delete that. That's what I love about Git, is I can just do that and see if we'll get away with it. I want to bring all of this stuff up a directory. Okay. So that should be empty now. Okay, and it is. So now I've got my solution folder. See if it's the same thing's happening here. No, okay. I've got my solution folder. I've got my web project. Okay. So let's go ahead and open this solution, which will be a blank solution at this point, and we'll go ahead and get this stuff. Go ahead and get this stuff squared away. Okay. So I'm not sure why that directory structure was created that way. It might have automatically created the solution the first time I created the template or something like that. But either way, we'll add the existing web projects. We'll make sure that everything still builds and does all that good stuff. We may have to update, for example, the Docker context that we have and things like that, and make sure things work. We'll probably have to do some fixes on the build as well, but that's totally okay, because at the end of this, we will have unit tests as part of our process, and I love that. All right, so we've got our empty solution here. I'm going to go ahead and add those two projects, the existing projects. Okay. Adding the first project. And we'll go ahead and add the second project as well. Apparently my Visual Studio wants to be a little slow today. Okay. Go ahead and we'll add that additional existing project. We'll make sure it has a reference again. Okay, we'll add that project reference. All right, and then we should finally have we'll add that reference, and we'll make sure everything builds. We'll enable nCrunch again. Okay. So last time, when I set up nCrunch originally, I had these settings to allow parallel execution and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and use those settings again. So I'll execute my unit tests in parallel, all that sort of thing, which is great. So we'll let nCrunch boot up here and run its tests, and assuming that we can build everything, we'll go ahead and see what's going on there. Okay. Now I've also noticed I've sort of lost my ability to run. Okay, let's see. See if I pick up the ability to run this project in Docker again. Okay, I do. Okay. Looks like we've got all of our tests passing. I'm going to go ahead and build. Make sure it builds within Docker there, and assuming that still builds, and that's great. We've got all our context there. Now let's see here. The referenced project does not exist. So let's look at the references here. Maybe we have the old project referenced as well. We do. That's fine. Remove that. All right, so now I think we're at a decent spot. Our tests are running locally. We've got the container building. Okay, so let's. All right, so commit this as reorganize around solution. Great. Go ahead and push that. For those of you who are joining the stream for the first time, you may not know that one of my personal preferences is to make sure that we are going ahead and creating work in progress pull requests. So we'll reorganize around that solution file. Great, great. And we'll add that WIP. So now we've got the Azure DevOps pipeline, which is running our container build commands, right? So we should be able to go into our Dockerfile here and modify that accordingly, and then go ahead and copy those things. So now we're looking at, let's look at what we're copying now. So now we have in the src directory, copy conmarepo.web/conmarepo.web.csproj, okay? But we probably want to do, in the src folder, we probably want to copy the solution, and we probably want to copy all of the project files. So I think I may have to look up the Docker syntax on that. If anybody's got the Docker familiarity, I just don't have the memory recall on that, so feel free to jump in if you remember how this works. So I think we definitely want to copy the solution. And I'm going to disable Karnak for a second because otherwise it's going to be throwing those things up as I... Okay. So we'll want to, from src, we'll want to copy the solution file. It's not .web at that point. It's okay. I think we want to copy. All right, we'll just do, for now, we'll just do all three. It's fine. And copy that, and we'll say .test.unit. Okay, so hopefully we've got that. And for those of you who are joining us, thanks for being here. Definitely feel free to comment on the music if you like that or don't like that. I never know what anybody's preference is for that, and I try to be a little cognizant. It throws me off a little bit when I'm running it, but feel free to comment on that if you've got any questions or concerns about the music. I'm happy to switch that up. All right, so now we've got that here. Let's go ahead and we run, instead of that, we'd run the restore on the solution, I believe. Through the web here. So up to this point, I think that would be correct. We're going to copy those files. We're going to go ahead and run the restore on the solution itself. Then we're going to copy everything. And then we're going to go. And so rather than building the CS proj file, I think we're going to build the solution here. So let's see about that. Okay. So the working directory is going to be here. So what we're saying is build this file and then publish it. So rather than that, I think we want to say run the tests first. So let's go ahead and run the tests. So we'll say, before we do running the tests, we'll say, or before we do the build of that project, we'll say run .NET test, and we're going to want to have, let's see, it worked here. And we'll say go.sln. All right, I think, so that should, double checking here, pull sln, run the restore, copy everything over, and then you should run .NET test against the SLM. We should also build it. So we'll probably have a repeat build task here, but for now, what I care about is, does this run at all? So let's go ahead and go back to here. We've got our Dockerfile here. Let's go ahead and build again. All right, it looks like it built correctly. Let's go ahead and see how this fares. So we'll say introduce solution into Dockerfile. Let's push that. And then let's go ahead and follow that Azure DevOps pipeline as it goes ahead. Now, hopefully what we'll see is that it builds that stuff just like we'd expect it, and then it goes ahead and runs it. Now, what I'm thinking is we added a Docker context previously, and now that we moved the folder structure to be correct, we might actually need to remove that additional context piece as well. That's okay. We'll give it a shot here. Those of you who are in the chat or on the stream, I'm interested to know, what is your experience with Docker? Are you using it a lot? Are you not using it at all? Is it like a novelty to you? How do you feel about Docker and containers in this way? Oh, let's see. Didn't build here. Okay. Oh, no Dockerfile matching. Ah, okay, that makes sense. We have to edit our pipelines YAML to find that, since we move the folder around. So see here, I should have noticed this when we were setting it up. Dope. Let's go ahead and save that. Fix location of Dockerfile. Let's go ahead and push that up. At least it failed fast, I guess. Alright. Interesting that I'm not seeing any builds kick off. Definitely pushed it. I may just be being impatient again, which is fine. There we go. I do need to learn to be kinder to my cloud services. Also curious for those of you out there, are you using Azure, using AWS, or using no cloud at all right now? I mean, what are you using on a day-to-day basis? You know, is this, you know, I'm doing Azure DevOps and Azure and stuff like that, but I'm not sure what people are using for your cloud environments, if you're using a cloud at all, if you're still doing on-prem stuff. Definitely let me know. Build failed. That's totally fine. No such file or directory, so it's not finding the solution file. Okay. I should also be able to cd. Let's see, I've got my solution file here. Oh, that makes sense. Docker is operating. Right, Docker's operating within the comma-repo.web file, not the actual solution here. So now let's go ahead, you know, I think we need to do actually is go ahead and move that Docker file up. Or provide a different context for it. I think that's what we need actually here. Build context location, right? We have repo.web. So instead, we'll move that to just be the src folder. Okay. All right, and that makes sense. Now everything's got to be relevant or relative to this directory here. So we should be able to say, okay, src. All right, we'll give that a shot. So let's go ahead and do. Let's go ahead and push that up. Okay. Oops. Sorry, we'll go ahead and push that up. What's the it's pushing actually? I wasn't sure if there's a keyboard shortcut for pushing or not. All right. Okay. Kick off another pipeline. All right, there we go. Now I'm assuming this is probably going to fail because we messed with the context location, and so there's probably some other relative pathing that isn't going to work as we want it to, which is okay. I mean, that's fine. I mean, maybe we'll get lucky. Who knows? All right, pulling all the base containers that we're using throughout. All right, looks like it is finding those things. Okay. So far, so good. All right, this is good. All right, it's restoring. Hey, we might be onto something here. Okay. Look at that. 6 successful tests as part of that. We're still building the correct app there. Now, again, we're building it twice here, so I'm going to probably add an issue for follow-up, but mostly what I care about at this point, like, okay, so the build's a little long. Okay, maybe it's doing a little bit of stuff twice. Like, at this point, I don't care. It works. That's fantastic. I'm going to add a new issue for follow-up. Dockerfile, building projects twice, and I'll say that, you know, we are currently building the solution and then building the web project again. All right, so we need to do it once. Great. So we've got that. So we've got that saved for next time. So at this point today, we've gotten to the spot where we have gotten unit tests. We've gotten the tests around the controller. We've got tests around the all of the the service that we created. We've got the Docker pipeline updated and running those tests, and now we've got automated tests being run as part of our pipeline. And I think that's a pretty good spot to be in. So I'm going to go ahead and actually remove the whip from this. I feel okay about that. Should pick up on that, and we'll go ahead and squash that and merge it. Makes a lot more sense. Okay. All right, so I think at this point we've got a pretty good spot to stop. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the music down here and just say, I appreciated you hanging out today with me today. Tomorrow or the next day, hopefully, we're going to do another stream, and here we're going to get into start. Now that we've got our service in place, we've got our basic test harness in place. We're going to go ahead and start. Really building things out, getting some additional information for these repos that we're pulling, so that people can see at a glance. And then hopefully we'll even start to do an action such as creating an issue in a repository and pinning it, something like that, and seeing which repositories have been archived or have been sunsetted by our project here. And so feel free to join in next time. I really appreciated everyone dropping by the stream today, and hopefully we'll see you in the future. So my classic sign off that I've been working on is I love you all. And I hope that you're doing well in your lives and outside of our digital world here. So we'll see you next time on the next stream. All right, have a good one. Bye.